What's up, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast here on YouTube. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join me as always. And today's topic is an interesting one. Probably not going to win me any Webby Awards. Not going to go into too much detail on anything particular. We are in the midst of a little bit of a downtime in the off season before free agency. I'll pick up my, kind of team in review series tomorrow unless something big happens and talk about tight ends. But today I brought up an interesting topic on Twitter on Monday. Actually was on the radio with Bart Winkler and we were discussing the state of the Packers. And one of the topics that came up was, who had a better last decade, Tampa Bay Buccaneers or Green Bay Packers. So I wanted to ask the question on Twitter and see, as a fan, would you rather have the Buccaneers last decade or would you rather have the Packers last decade? And it was very interesting to see some of the responses on Twitter. There were some very hardcore opinions on both sides, to say the least. It's Twitter, so of course there were. But it was really interesting to me, and I'll be totally transparent. I'll go through my thought process on it in a moment, but I will say this up front. I completely expected that people would have said Tampa Bay. So before we get there, let's go over what the last decade has looked like for both of these teams. So let's start with Tampa Bay. So going back to the start of the 2011 season, they go 4-12, 7-9, 4-12, 2-14, 6-10, have their first winning season at 9-7 in 2016, but do not make the playoffs. They go 5-11, 5-11, 7-9, and then 11-5 and win the Super Bowl in their only playoff appearance of the entire decade, of course, with Tom Brady at quarterback. So if you're counting at home, that is 10 seasons, 9 of which they did not make the playoffs, 8 of which were losing seasons, most of which were well below 500, one playoff appearance, but one Lombardi trophy. On the flip side, you've got Green Bay, which is almost the exact opposite. So you've got, starting in 2011, 15-1, losing the divisional round, 11-5, losing the divisional round, 8-7-1, losing the wild card, 12-4, losing the conference championship game, 10-6, losing the divisional round, 10-6, losing the conference championship game, 7-9, missed the playoffs, 6-9-1, missed the playoffs, 13-3, losing the conference championship game, and then 13-3 again, and once again lose in the conference championship game. So a very consistent contending team that basically goes above 500 in 8 of the 10 seasons, makes the playoffs in 8 out of the 10 seasons, has mostly heartbreaking losses in 8 of the 10 seasons, goes to 4 NFC championship games, but not only does not win a Super Bowl, doesn't even get to a Super Bowl in the past decade. So that begs the question, what Bart and I talked about on the radio on Monday and what I wanted to bring up on Twitter. As a fan, which fan base had a more successful and better last decade? And there's a million different ways that you can look at this, right? So some of the responses that I started to get from fans were, I wouldn't want to give up cheering for Aaron Rodgers for the past 10 seasons. And, I wouldn't want to cheer Tom Brady on to a Super Bowl after he was a Patriot. And I'm getting, somebody who's just coming to Tampa for 1 or 2 years. Like, I understand that, and that's one way to look at it, but take those things aside. The players don't matter. It's two totally different teams. Maybe a better way to look at it would be to say, Tampa Bay and Green Bay both are brand new franchises, and over the course of the next 10 years, one of the teams is going to, basically be terrible for 9 seasons, but win a Super Bowl in their 10th. The other is going to be mostly really good for 10 seasons, but fail to get to or win a Super Bowl. Which team would you rather be a fan of? And maybe another way to ask it would be, all right, let's say something happens to Aaron Rodgers tomorrow and he can no longer be quarterback of the Packers. And over the course of the next, handful of seasons, Jordan Love struggles. They go 5 straight losing seasons. Then there's, 4 more years of a different rookie quarterback and he struggles. And then in year 10, they get, Russell Wilson at age 42 and they win a Super Bowl with Russell Wilson. That would be basically the equivalent of where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been this past 10 seasons. Or would you rather have the Packers be consistently good for 8 of the next 10 years? Again, we don't know who all those players are going to be, but ultimately never make it to a Super Bowl and have crushing defeat after crushing defeat in the playoffs. So as things stand, as I'm recording this podcast today, looking at the totals of the poll, Green Bay is in the lead right now with 65.2% of the votes. And Tampa Bay has, of course, 34.8% of the votes. So I was very, very surprised that over 65% of respondents on this poll, now obviously mostly Packer fans, because it's my Twitter account and that's who follows me, but we're at almost 12,000 votes, and 65% or more of those believe that they would rather take the 10 years without a championship, which, again, if I'm being honest, surprised me a bit. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think there's a variety of different ways to look at this, but it surprised me because all I hear about in Green Bay all the time is winning championships. And it's honestly what the franchise talks about. They're not here to raise, NFC North banners. They're not here to get to the playoffs. They're here to win Super Bowls and ultimately win championships. Now, losing seasons as a fan are not fun in any way, shape, or form. And for me, I'm a very much the journey is greater than the end. And what I mean by that, if you're not familiar with that saying, is that the experience, the journey of going on that run to the playoffs into the Super Bowl is better than actually winning the Super Bowl itself. Think back to 2011, 1996, or February 2011, or January 1997, whatever it was. But the 96 season, the 2010 season, think back to those. And yeah, the Super Bowls were amazing, right? The Steelers game, the Patriots game, both of those games were great. And certainly, those of us who watch both of them will remember those games forever. But I can think of just as many games throughout the course of that season. And it was the season as a whole that was amazing. You win the Super Bowl, you celebrate that night. And then the next morning, and eventually there's the parade and stuff like that, but you start getting ready and preparing for the free agency and the draft and how you can get back there the next season. It's almost like the page turns so incredibly fast. It takes a week to about maybe celebrate and be excited about it. And then it's just kind of on to the next season. It wasn't just that one game. It just wasn't that one experience of winning the Super Bowl. It was everything that led up until that point. And even in some of the crushing defeats that the Packers have had in some of these playoff games, some of those seasons were really incredibly enjoyable. And I know this was during the Super Bowl run, but maybe my favorite game during this time wasn't the Super Bowl. It was the Falcons game down in Atlanta in the divisional round that led to the Packers winning a Super Bowl with the Tremont pick six before halftime. One of my all-time favorite games as a Packer. Another one, Seahawks-Packers in the snow before the Favre interception to Corey Webster in the NFC Championship game. That Seahawks game in the snow, easily one of the greatest game ever, as a Packer fan. You've got Packers beating Tom Brady and Rodgers beating Brady in a regular season game. I think that was in 2014. Maybe that's wrong, actually. I forget what year it was, but with the Jordy Nelson touchdown before half. That was a phenomenal game. And those are games that I remember no matter what, regardless of whether there was a championship won or not. So I can understand the idea that maybe the journey here and being, a competitive team for the course of a decade and having only 2 down years through the course of that time, one of which was almost completely primarily due to an Aaron Rodgers injury, I understand that. I understand that this was a fairly fun decade of Packers football, even if it didn't result in any championships, and even if it resulted in 4 crushing, heartbreaking losses in the NFC Championship game. So I get that side of it. I understand the other side completely as well. I mean, ultimately, this is a game that is meant to hang banners and win championships. And this is Titletown. And Packer fans talk all the time about how many championships they have through the course of their history. Nobody as a Packer fan is ever saying, well, we got to the Super Bowl in 1997. That counts for something. Or, what about the Brett Favre lost in the NFC Championship to the Giants. But, you're not bringing those games up as, things that you're proud of as a Packer fan. You're talking about championships and Super Bowl victories. And in the last decade, Tampa has one, Green Bay has none. And, there's only one of those teams that gets to celebrate every single year, and they're so incredibly rare. I would lean, if I'm being honest, I think I would lean towards the championship. Now, I should also say I'm very rare in the fact that even bad teams, and I know I've never had to sit through more than 2 back-to-back non-playoff seasons in my lifetime, basically, because I started watching basically in 1991, And since that time, that's going to age me a bit for some of you, but since that time, Green Bay has never had more than 2 back-to-back seasons where they haven't made the playoffs. So I can't fully say for sure that I would, still be super geeked about 9 of those in a row without making the playoffs. Maybe that would be absolutely abysmal, but I think I would enjoy those journeys and seeing how the team builds up and having early draft picks and how they're going to change the coaching staff and how they're going to continuously improve and go through that process, especially if I knew that at the end of it was going to be a Super Bowl victory in that 10th season. Now, I wouldn't know that going in, but a part of me would take the Super Bowl. It is interesting, though, if you were to ask me of my other teams that I enjoy, the Brewers, the Bucks, the Badgers, basketball, Badgers football, whatever, I would take the championship in a heartbeat. I would, no question about it whatsoever. If you said they're going to suck for 9 years and you're going to get a championship in the 10th, sign me up for any of those. I am of the hardcore belief that outside of the Packers, I'm not sure I'm going to see a Wisconsin championship in my lifetime. So I would very much take that for any of the other franchises. But Green Bay, I can very much understand the argument of wanting good football. And maybe a part of that is due to the fact that I've seen the Packers win 2 championships. And I think Packer fans, could be a little bit skewed because we have had, a couple recent Super Bowls, at least semi-recent Super Bowls. So a lot of fans have experienced those and seen those, and they would rather take competitive football than necessarily needing to see another. I'm at the point of desperation with maybe some of the other teams to say, just give me the championship. I don't care. They can suck for the rest of their, my life here on earth. I just want to see a championship with the Brewers or the Bucks or one of those teams because, like I said, I'm very afraid that it's never going to happen. So it's all logistics and it's all who you are as a fan. It's interesting. I asked one of my good friends who's a Chicago Bears fan. I thought for sure he would say, he's lived through, decades of bad Bears football anyway. I thought for sure he would say, give me the championship. But he said, give me the 10 years of, mostly sustained success and being competitive year in and year out. And there's absolutely an argument to be made for that as well. So I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, and I can definitely see both sides of the argument here. For me personally, I slightly lean towards giving me the championship over the decade for the Packers, and for any other team that I'm a fan of, 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000, give me that championship. But it is a really interesting situation, especially given how bad Tampa Bay was for those first 9 years prior to winning their championship in the 10th year. Either way, Packers have had Aaron Rodgers for the past 10 years, past decade, and have not won a Super Bowl in that time. And that's disappointing and in a way devastating, and hopefully they can turn it around. I know Super Bowls are hard to get. I know they're hard to win. I know there's only one given out every year, and there's 32 teams trying desperately to get it. But when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, just like when they had a quarterback like Brett Favre, you got to take advantage of that. And right now, we're on almost 3 decades with only 2 Super Bowls. Only 2, I get it. There's maybe a little bit of entitled town in there, but still, you would have liked to seen maybe a little bit more over the course of that time frame with those 2 quarterbacks. I don't think I'm being too entitled by saying that. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Like I said, I don't think it's gonna rank number 1 on my all-time Pack a Day podcast videos here on YouTube, but I do think it is a really interesting conversation. Definitely weigh in below in the comments. I'd be happy to hear and excited to hear what you guys are thinking. I appreciate you watching. Make sure to check out today's audio version with Jake Morley, and he's breaking down a couple prospects that are ideal Packer prospects. Make sure to check by here tomorrow, where, as I mentioned, unless some breaking news happens, I will be covering the tight ends and the state of the Packers tight end position on the roster and where they could be headed next year. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.